Thank you so much. Can you hear me properly? Yes. Can you see my screen? We're all set.
We
Okay.
can hear you and you can see your screen.
I mean, it's a huge pleasure to be here with such a great panel of speakers with great discussions and also this amazing audience doing really, really timely and accurate questions. So, two disclaimers. I work a lot with industries within the internships of the University of Lisbon with several industries working on AI, not only text, but also speech. What I will be saying applies to interpretation, speech technologies, but for the sake of simplicity, I will just use the word translation as an overall umbrella. Another thing that I would like to say is this presentation, I made a lot of choices in this presentation. Let me tell you about it. So I will focus a lot on concrete cases. I'm tired as a teacher of having students ask me about the nightmares of AI, and I'm tired of seeing colleagues talking about nightmares of AI. I do think they might exist and they do exist and we need to anticipate. But if we have concrete examples, if we show people concrete examples, then the message will be different. And that's why I bring you today a lot of the work conducted by my master and PhD students at the University of Lisbon on using generative AI for translation and interpretation. And I also talk to you about augmented communities and how they can be a reality. And I'm not doing this in any industry's view. It's my personal teacher's view, if you want. And also the impact of generative AI in industries and in pipelines and implementations, because this is a huge discussion in the European Association for Machine Translation, as you can probably anticipate, and give you some concrete examples of initiatives on responsible AI. So a lot of what I've been saying will be things made concrete from Ling's work or Joss's work, and I can anticipate all the some of the other participants as well. And let's start with the internships program in a nutshell. So basically, the University of Lisbon works a lot with with industries, and there is a process, a workflow for this. And this is already after several years doing this and a lot of experience going wrong. There's already a workflow for this. So we have a negotiation between the university and the partners. We align the term of requirements. And if it's a yes, then legal will verify everything. Human resources are super important to align either with the supervisors on the university side, but also on industry. And here, cultural fitness, soft skills, whatever you want to name it, what Lean was talking about, doing this in the universities and training people for cultural fitness, it's super important. And then there's alignment between industry and universities on topics to be researched. The students are interviewed. And to tell you from my experience, it's not always the best student that gets selected, meaning the most top scoring student. Basically, the selection goes to very flexible, adaptable, conscious, aware person who can work well with others. So I would tick the boxes that Ling just showed us a few moments ago. And it's also very important on the university side to have scientific validity, but on the industry side to also be useful. Because if there's just theory and nothing concrete from that, you will not have internships with industry for sure, at least in my experience. So what's needed, basically, it's alignment between people, and aligning expectations is super important. It's scientific validation, and it's also a lot of work on the student side on labeling enough data and creating goal sets. But this paradigm has been shifting, and I will be telling more about this, and assessing models that might get into production. And I will give you a few examples of these models getting to production. So a lot of the students' work were, in fact, affecting the roadmap of the company. And I'm talking about students from the School of Arts and Humanities, so usually translators. with a professional translation background, training, etc. I'm a teacher of technologies, translation technologies, and what I teach is how they can use in a room LLMs, whatever LLM they pick, but they need to be sure of what they're picking in what for and for which circumstances. They also can use empty models, they can use cut tools, they can use whatever they see fit for a certain goal or a project in a very active learning way, meaning it's based on projects that resemble more or less what they will face in a professional scenario. And they will need to make very conscious decisions on these steps. Just to give you a few examples, there are several examples here. There was a student working on a master thesis with Babel, and she put into production a module on source quality assessment. And this had a huge impact because it's basically one of the first modules in a pipeline. And this was a big gain. She now probably earns more than myself because she's so skilled on this that she created the copyright for the company on this module, just to give you an example. But this was based mostly on a paradigm of using machine translation to pipelines. And basically what the students were focusing was on testing, labeling, and training a lot of modules, and assessing again and testing again, and doing this until the quality was there. This has been changing a lot. And now we're talking about product innovation, not things into production, but innovative ideas coming from the fact that you can use generative AI to boost models, to boost pipelines. And this usually is a very aligned effort between translators and the natural language processing engineers. So basically, translators that are represented here are working in new features or new products in several companies, like voice interaction with speech technologies for low resource languages, and Babel for contextual information, like Joss was saying and well said, this idea, this legacy that you need to segment because computers don't have enough memory does not make any sense. You will lose the unity of a text. You will lose the narrative of the text. So people are now very focused on how to create and to eliminate this cage segmentation thing that comes from computational legacy and has nothing to do with our cognitive processes translating. And this is a huge discussion in industry right now because this is changing how we see cut tools, how we use large language models, etc. There's several students working on that. There's also the idea that, and Joss was talking about this quite in a deep way, that you cannot do any feature, any product. You need to do it with responsible AI practices, meaning you need to be accountable for the products you're creating, and those products need to be fair, sustainable, etc., as Joss was describing. There's also a lot of efforts on creating modules for plain language, for medical content with large language models. I've been working also with public organizations with my colleague, Eleanor Cornelius from South Africa. And the idea is information should be accessible to everyone, like Lynn was saying. There's a lot of, and this product and this feature, cultural transcreation, is already getting to production, a lot on adapting the message to the target audience, transcreating this message, because the source is not suitable for the culture, for the target cultural, or even creating guardrails and red teaming the large language models, because this is super important. You cannot just offer a large language model, say, here it is, it's publicly available, without anticipating the risks or the consequences of that advertisement. So this is concrete examples of things going on with translators. They're all professional translators. They're working, they're trained as professional translators, but they're using a lot their sensibility to data. They're prompt engineering a lot, and they're crafting prompts in such an ingenious way they had to study also cognitive processes to craft these processes. And it's super important to align what a human mind does with prompt engineering. And this is an art that translators are cultivating these days. And also testing. Testing is super important, will continue to be, and nothing can be done without the validity and agency of a human saying this is going to go to production. And this human is usually a team of translators or computational linguists, and we will talk about more about these terms we're using these days. What about augmented communities? We've been listening about augmented communities a lot recently. It's not a new thing, but I think it's very important, and even more so now that everybody's using words like harnessing the potential of AI, boosting the potential of AI, or I don't know, there's a lot of adjectives, verbs going on augmenting the capacities of the humans with the artificial intelligence. This is not a new idea. Sharon O'Brien recovered a very important study from 62 that says basically augmentation is to use tools and technology to assist humans. And are we assisting humans with machine translation, with quality estimation, with the quality assessment that we do, and even with large language models at the state they are in right now, since there are generic models, they're not done for the purpose of translation, but they're very good translating for certain language, mostly the very economical and profitable languages as usual. So the idea of augmented translations was also in 2020, and even before that, in 2017, Arlo Mel discussed that some companies were already doing augmented translation pipelines and were increasing productivity, time, etc., with these pipelines. The whole idea of these pipelines is that you have the human in the center of this pipeline, and the human would be supervising automated or semi-automated processes in different pipelines in what he calls, in a metaphor he uses, lights out project management. Basically, the idea is you have a light out manager that will click the button for the light to appear, but this person has a centralized and controlled view of all the processes, all the steps. We can replace in this view empty by Kiwi or LLMs that will be facing basically the same adaptations right now. So I don't think it's a very new model, but it's a very disruptive for other reasons. I think the pipelines are still trying to accommodate to this model, but in different ways. And these ways are bringing disruptive new paradigms for translators. And if my students can grab this opportunity and have a word to say in a roadmap of a company or in a new discipline in a university, I would be very proud of them as I am. So how can we work for the concept of augmented communities? First, the communities need to understand, and Joss was just showing us that they are, what are they doing, how they are interacting. So you need to survey a lot the communities, and I'm using in plural because it's not only translators. It's the final reviewer, it's the copywriter, it's the terminologist. We're using community or translator in such a broad way. And this encompasses so many roles these days. And we're still focusing, in my view, and I might be a little bit critical here, it's that we're focusing still on words and charging per word instead of seeing all the potential that translators can do right now. And I believe they can do a lot. They have a lot to do on training communities to be better with the feedback provided for these communities. They can embrace technologies with literacy. This is super important to cope with the challenges, because there's a lot of discomfort on using new technologies when you don't know what they're doing or what the purpose of what they're doing and how to interact with them. So there needs to be also within this communities literacy and training. And if you already have very skilled translators went through this process, they are ambassadors of this training. They are the best ambassadors. I've been reading a lot on peer-to-peer knowledge, and it's true because I've been doing some experiments on peer-to-peer knowledge. And when the professional translators have been through these changes, gives this as an ambassador to others, is a great messenger of that. There's also the use of machine translation in quality technologies, and they said to allow for less cognitive effort, but not for all the mistakes, not for creativity, metaphors, nothing for more literary aspects. And Anna will be telling us for sure. But humans like myself translating, we're not very good with numbers, repetitions, white spaces, closing brackets, or even thinking of synonyms or antonyms or negatives and affirmatives. We can change and swap very easily this information. This becomes very critical. So if in what I'm not good, I have something supporting me, telling me, please correct this, I would appreciate that. What I don't like is stupid suggestions when I'm doing a more creative work, because then I need to enable that feature and be more expansive and creative in what I'm doing. We also need to adapt fast to changes, and they're here, they're already being implemented. And there's a lesson also learned from all this process, and I usually say this to my students, is that you're facing very unclear, fuzzy times and very unclear technologies that can put a lot of things at risk, but can also give you advantages. So it's very fair that you can just fail and learn from the failure and pass this information to others, so we can create this sense of community and better train people on how to use technologies with different views. Again, we can also do automation, but always with human in the loop validation and agency, in the same metaphor as a light out manager who does this along the pipeline. And this is being done with all the industries I've been working with several teams that are skilled on either computational linguistics or translation studies. You need to have ground truth. You need to create data to feed communities, to feed modules, to feedback, continuously give feedback to all these modules and people. It's not only modules, it's mostly people. And this ground truth comes from skilled, trained translators or computational linguists. And this is a very important role. And they have the final word to say if a module goes to production or not. And this goes to speech or to text technologies. Both of them are using the teams they have of translators to do those decisions. And they don't go to production if the quality is not there. We can discuss what quality is, and I agree with a lot of things that Josh said on quality, but we can discuss that after. There's also a need to revise roles, because we're just talking about translator, but this is a gigantic umbrella these days. This is just huge. And we need to discuss skills based on AI for human-centric augmentation. And this means getting skilled and specialized, trained people to do that. And that had a huge impact in the way I train my students these days. 1 year ago, I had to reshape the unit translation technologies. And this was intense work, and I reshaped it a lot. So what I gave previously is almost these days a prehistory of times, because things have changed completely. It doesn't mean that universities need to create dependency to industries, but there must be a cycle. There must be an understanding of where the needs are, what's going on, to also be able to get this to the university and train our students to be prepared for that. And a lot is going on prompt engineering, on validating several tasks in the community. I have students working on assessment in the medical domain, on cultural transcreation, on guardrails, etc. And these are completely different tasks. And translators are doing those tasks because they have the pragmatic, the social, the psychological capacity to have this language as not only grammar, but much beyond that, that we really need these days. And I will be advocating for that, that translators these days are just an umbrella for a lot more than translation. And I will explain a bit later. There's also the need to make concrete actions, and we need to anticipate. I don't know if anticipate is the right word, but at least get ready for. We need to have a better understanding of when MT is needed, for which use cases is still needed. And is there, for instance, for high resource languages in customer support, MT is very, very good. There's nothing we can do about it. There's so much training data. It was so much post-edited that for commercial languages, it's very, very good. But for other domains, it's not there yet, and for other languages as well. And even the bidirectionality. So if it goes from some language to English, it's very different, the quality from English to other languages. And we're still, people who understand this and see data knows that the AI hype is just a hype and nothing else. There's also the need to adjust pipelines. And these pipelines also mean accommodating new pricing models, new things that you need to do. And you need to alert your client that this hype doesn't mean that you don't need a human in the loop to validate the data. So a lot of the clients these days are telling industries that we don't need the human anymore, we just need AI. And then they have miserable results, hallucinations, fake information, and then they understand that this was a huge risk. There's also lower quality use cases that can quickly move with MT only or MT mostly, and customer support is one of those in certain areas. But there's high quality use cases that requires a lot of effort, like the so-called these days high-risk domains, legal, medical, etc. So what's the impact on generative AI? I took this word cloud from the internet, and as you can see, it's a lot on language, education, translation, lexicon, vocabulary, translator, interpreter. And I did a very small experience. I took a lot of the words that were in new job opportunities from big tech, and not only big tech, from NIMSY list, let's put it this way, and also from conferences. And I put it in a monkey learn word cloud generator. You find this word clouds everywhere. And it was a very simple, very simple experiment just to see how disruptive this has been in the terms being used, in the concepts of these terms and the applications of these terms. And basically the cloud is still translation, obviously, it's there always, but it has expressions like language specialist, subject matter expert, multilingual language technologies, responsible machine translation, large language models, obviously, cultural transcreation, cultural values, etc. So this means that there are changes. There are really changes in the way people hire translators these days, in the way they shape what the roles and skills of these people should be. And there's this challenges we also need to face. And when we say these challenges, we need to bring them to the classroom and discuss them with our students. Basically, some of them were already stated by the previous speakers. I will go fast here. Fuzzy frontiers between human and machine. This is very clear, and even more so right now. We need adaptive things and adaptive systems, but what is really adaptive? is using MT or using a small LLM, because that small LLM will be enough to do that. Would a public LLM be suitable for all languages, for all domains? What are we doing in terms of those decisions when we say adaptive systems? Because it seems such a generic umbrella again that we put here everything. There's also a lack of metrics and assessment to take into account the different paradigms these days. I don't think Comet is enough. I don't think Bleu is enough. I don't think any of those are enough, because they will give you a number, but they won't. They can even give you explanations these days, but they don't give you the why, the reason why this was made. Why is this mistake important? So this is still on us, and I believe it will be on us. There's also a lot on alignment and safeguards for responsible AI, but again, it's easy said than done. And I will try to give you some concrete examples on this. The concept of another challenges that we're facing is that if we teach our students to look for the word translator for job opportunities, we might be corsetting their options a lot, I would say, because you have concepts such as language specialists, subject matter experts, co-pilots, human co-pilots for a automatic co-pilot, and translators are also being hired to be human co-pilots of virtual co-pilots. And more recently, even the concept of linguistic engineer. So it's someone that is, and I've quoted here, very focused on language, very focused on adapting to audiences, very sensitive to data sets. And it's a person who will be responsible, only that, to improve human-computer interactions. And these are usually jobs that are being occupied by skilled and trained translators again. There's several examples of data providers using communities, or if you want, augmented communities like Appen, like Upwork, or Lionbridge. There's several examples of those around the globe. And there's also ways that they're explaining what they're doing with data and how they require communities to intervene with this data. And it's very clear that we're going into a direction. If you do this exercise with the big NIMSI and or even half of the NIMSI list, you will encounter a lot of expressions such as multilingual text and speech transcreation, prompt engineering, testing, linguistic engineering for adaptations. And you will face a new era of adaptations. I think it's new in the sense, obviously translators were trained already with the skills, but it's new in the sense that they need to adapt to suggestions and outputs as never before. They are so deceptively fluent as the outputs of large language models. And there's studies in psychology already stating that students and young generations are conforming to what the outputs of the large language models are, not getting the right distance or critical thinking about those outputs. And we really need to have a word to say that. So about pipelines, since I'm involved in a lot of discussions with industries, I think I should bring what industry is doing on pipelines, because we're talking about training translators, but what are we training for? What will they face? And I have a mission in my life. I could be fully employed by industry, but I think I have a mission to train people to face challenges and difficulties. And I love that in my life. It's the part that I love the most, besides my son and husband, obviously, but it's how we prepare people. And this is a huge task. Every time I need to redefine a course, I face a lot of questions, and usually it helps a lot having previous students telling me what they're facing, or the new students giving me feedback on that. And I've been restructuring a lot the courses based on their feedback. So I was part of a panel with very interesting people like Kirti Vashi, Jose Palomares, Manuel Hans, And the idea was not to put it in the pink color, everything is beautiful, we're in hype, was to really say, this is not easy. Everybody's trying to adjust. Translators, industries, users, everyone is trying to adjust. So how we walk this path and how we do it the best we can. This was the question we wanted to answer. And together we made an effort to come up with three core aspects that for us were essential, for all the panelists were essential in our discussion. We could have different views, and there were very different views, I can tell you. But there were three core aspects that we really need to put into pipelines, or at least the outputs of those pipelines to have this. One is trust. How we build trust with generative AI, knowing that it hallucinates, it creates fake information, how we create modules to take that into account before delivering information to someone, how we can create products that build trust, are responsible, and have the accurate information we're looking for without hallucinating or without having cultural westernized views like ChatGPT. There is very Western view, and that's why Falcon was created as a reaction to that, because they didn't see themselves in the ChatGPT large language model. And also, a second aspect is success of generative AI based on case studies. Because everybody says generative AI is tremendous for everything, every language. And this is completely complete lie. It's not. It's not there for endangered language. It's not there, and there's a CSA report on this that I really recommend you people to see. It's not there for, I would say, this. I think it's 17 most commercial languages. If you accept that, I would say 10 from the industries I work with, then you would have almost nothing. No visibility, no digital visibility, no digital impact on those languages. We also need to ponder the potential successors of LLMs. And this might seem very crazy, but there's a lot of teams already working on what's after LLMs, because we already saw the shortcuts. How people will overcome this shortcuts. Will it be with improving modules on large language models already existing, or will it be a new technology built upon the large language models? And there are basically, we also agreed, the panelists of this Gala 24 panel, that there are several tasks that large language models are performing quite well if using very skilled translators on doing so, like source cleanup and preparation, empty output quality assessment, even post-editing, automated post-editing. For certain domains in certain languages, again, it's very good. Text manipulation, style, tonality, also change of formality, even cultural transcreation. Adaptations to cultural are a huge thing these days in industries. And I could go on and on and on, because there are very good, although generic, to several tasks, but not all the tasks, and not all the languages, and not all the directions of the languages. What are the core obstacles? We already heard some of them, right? I would say almost of them. So it's latency and throughput. People think sometimes that, my students do this a lot, that when they give an answer to ChatGPT or Gemini or Llama, they're providing more information for the training, but the training doesn't happen in these large language models like that. So they take months to be trained, or years to be trained. These days is months. You don't see an immediate effect of your interactions with the system. And this can be very inconsistent along the time, because it does not preserve long-term memory like we do, the core aspects of those interactions. It's also very complex. People say small, large language models with 7 billion, and it's a contradiction. They're large, but they're small, and they have billions of parameters. How we can do this with smaller models for sustainability issues that do not increase 0.00001 on the performance that will give you a new paper based on this 0001. A problem of cost and performance predictability, because this is a black box for most of industries, so it's a third party and you cannot touch inside, so you're interacting with a third party. And it's very costly, like Jos was saying. The language coverage, CCSA report, and you will really see that from the more than 7,000 languages we have, 17 are very well suitable. And I would say from my experience, 10. And there's also a lot of problems with workflows integration when you want to put a large language model, third-party large language model in your own pipeline. And possibilities of a large context window is still slow. We're still living in the cage of segmentation everywhere. And this expression comes from the CEO of Intento, the cage of segmentation. I would say I wouldn't use the word cage, but it is corseting people a lot, especially if we think of cognitive processes of translation. Segmentation is definitely not the first thing you would think of. And it's really a legacy issue from memory and GPUs. Automatic post-editing is still a big issue, and on-the-fly quality assessment is quite challenging. No matter the metric you're using, or the most fancy one will still have problems and will still not give you what you really need. So Kirti Vashi tried to put this in a diagram for the audience, stating that we're right now using a hybrid system, meaning we're using own pipelines, industry-owned pipelines with large language models. And he gives this as an example. You have an initial translation with adaptive neural MT. If you have that in your system, you would have machine translation quality estimation scores that would identify lower quality segments, and those segments and only those segments would be put into, would be fed to large language models, and then would be automated, edited with large language models to improve the final output. This is not the pipeline for everyone, but this is an example of several industries are doing. I think we need definitely in several of those steps, humans to validate that information. There's several steps how to put this in production in a successful way. I will just point out a few of those because the list is quite extensive. One thing is where copilots can really help. For instance, silly mistakes that humans do when they're very tired. Upskill the talent for more specific modules or more specific needs you have. You need to have teams working on that, and you need to provide training to teams working on that. It's not just that interact with large language model and they will learn how to do it by their own. You have techniques to do it, you have ways to do it and to experience that. And you also need to find a better way to assess the capabilities of these models. And this goes in line with what Jos was discussing, and to improve ways of doing that in a much efficient and clear way for everyone. We need to create awareness. Literacy was already spoken a lot here. We need to create ethics training from C-level to everyone. The World Economic Forum is trying to give and creating tools to give, and teams also to give ethics training to C-level and to cascade that from everyone. I'm just giving you an example. For me, it's not the best example, but just to show how important ethics training is to be concrete in the industries, in the universities, everywhere. And we need to go beyond anticipating risks. We need methodologies for this. We need workflows for this. And we don't have it from the European AI Act yet. There will be a good practice code of AI led by prominent figures already, but there's still no concrete things put into production on this respect. And it's very challenging. And also be compliant with AI for good. What you're building is for humans. So if you're building something that will be harmful to a human, that should be accountable. That should be pointed out. And there must be consequences. And those are very clear in the European AI Act. To discuss the challenges and opportunities of having AI and the impact in the next generations, to discuss the risks in a very honest and frontal way and how to mitigate those risks. But we need frameworks to do this. Because if we take just the examples we have from the European AI Act, there will not be enough. And we're working with ethicists, philosophers, lawyers, and trainers from the public administration, universities, and industries to see how we can do this in Portugal in very concrete actions and enforce that to the public administration for a national strategy. But it's very hard, I can tell you. And enroll civil society. If we're doing all this and civil society knows nothing about what we're doing, then the narrative is not there and people don't know about this narrative. And we're just building things for our own ego sometimes or for industry to have MRR, etc. So we need to enroll civil society in what we do. What could we do better? A lot of things. A lot of the suggestions of industry are how we integrate faster, how we delete this legacy, how we mitigate this legacy issue of segmentation. It's a big thing. How we create flexible pipelines that are more adapted to contents, languages, etc. And how we create better methods to assess quality, because it's true that it's outputs. It's true that it's still a kind of post-editing, but it's a very different type of kind of post-editing. And the interactions with the systems are also very different. And you have quality not only on the output, but you have quality before the output and in the interactions with the output and even with the output. So I think there's a cycle of quality that we're all forgetting here. What could be based? What could we do better based on the reflections again of all these people, and also expanding to my own community, the European Association for Machine Translation. We need to leverage communities to understand what they're doing, to be involved in what they're doing, and to be trained to what they're doing. We also need to understand that there's times for research and there's completely different times for product and commercialization. And this sometimes creates frictions. And this sometimes can create misalignments, severe misalignments. And the students are the ones that are involved on this. So we really need to align these expectations. And also there's a lot on teams management and teams work. There's an extensive report from Google called Project Aristoteles. Google just says we did a lot of wrong stuff when creating teams. And we forgot about the soft skills a lot. We focused on technical skills and we ended up hiring people that had a very malicious way of working. And as I usually say, I prefer a student who does not know much scientifically, because then it's my job to train them, than someone that has not proper values towards his colleague or peer. That would be very hard to train. And I was checking your list, Lynn, and you had character. This is very challenging to test and to assess and to put into a concrete action. So I would like to have a conversation on that as well. I have a Christmas list, but I don't do futurology, as I usually say. I have this futuristic list, and I would love to have some students. I have one that is very crazy, would take some of this. The idea of agents interacting with agents, with human supervision in multilingual technology scenarios. I think we're almost there. there's multilingual and multimodal technologies, and it's not speech or text anymore. It's all together. As humans, we don't use just speech or just text. We use a lot more information, and we're forgetting that we need to put this information in the way we communicate and interact with others. There are green technologies. Joss gave great examples of that for future industries, and they're moving into that direction and anticipating big disruptions in this industries as well. I totally align with your thinking on this. And there's, in my view, maybe I'm too positive about it, but if we inform civil society, if we do a better job, I hate this term, we use a lot this term in Portugal, and I hate it, info excluded person. If this person is info excluded, it's on us to include this person. And no government, no public administration should use this word because it's nonsense. You should be the one including the person. So I think if we create a more informed civil society, you would have more conscious of the rights citizens making decisions and also making more democratic systems around the world, I would say. And I would just like to finalize with two examples. I still have time, Wilhelmine. Very, very shortly. Okay, very, very shortly.
Sure, of course. Yes, please go ahead.
On initiatives on responsible AI with translation and beyond. And I will be gladly to discuss what I mean by beyond. So I had the pleasure of this whole idea of responsible AI and responsible machine translation came with my friend and colleague Carla Parra. We were at DCU in an internship in a secondment within a project called Interact, coordinated by Sharon O'Brien. And we went for a coffee, and the result of that conversation in the Alex, by the way, Joss, you must know this, in the Alex, and the result of that conversation was a skeleton of a book. And Carla had tons of ideas, I had tons of ideas, but we didn't know how to answer our own questions. So we got a lot of experts helping us how to answer our questions. We had lawyers, we had philosophers, we had professional translators. We had Anna as well, and Joss as well in this book, talking about ethics and talking about workflows and translators. But we're also working in Portugal, and I'm proud of these projects. They're very, very challenging. They're quite insane in the amount of work we're putting into this. The idea of the Center for Responsible AI, it's a national initiative. It involves almost all the universities from north to south. It involves several industries, and it also involves civil society. And the idea is to create products that are responsible, they are more sustainable, they are using the responsible AI pillars such as human agency, assisting humans, accountability, fairness, etc. Privacy, etc. And the idea of this project is to anticipate the risks and how to mitigate these risks with tools, but not exclusively tools. In a contextualized view, that will have ethical training, that will have tools to support people on concrete things, but also will have methodologies put in place to understand and anticipate based on real case studies how to discuss risks. Because you just have an Annex 3 in the European AI Act that is very blurred, and now it's open to public discussion. And the idea is to improve that annex, not the text itself, not the legislation itself that's closed, but on concrete cases of use. Because there's examples, but we need to anticipate more examples, and there are things going on way beyond the European AI Act predicted and anticipated. So I'm part of the ethics committee with Virginia Dignum and Pedro Conceição, and the whole idea is we are consultants for these products to see if they are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, and if they are in fact responsible and in fact transposed to all citizens. There's another project, but this one has a different focus. This one is a Science for Policy project. It's also a national project. It involves 47 partners, and it's a huge effort in the country with very low amounts of money this time to provide guidance to public administration on strategies on responsible AI. And this project is about ethics, law, and literacy, and how we put together frameworks, training, measures, and how we train the new teachers. For instance, we're working a lot with the teachers training personnel to train from the first graders to the 12th graders to university students, basic core skills on AI, how they can anticipate risks, how they can have a more critical thinking on these models. And this involves public administration, industry and researchers, and also civil society, without whom this will not go through. And finally, there's a lot of partners from industry, research, from government itself, helping us on creating policy briefings and recommendations that can make concrete in the country. So my key takeaways, I usually do this exercise with my students very quickly. If I had to put some Post-its in my fridge today for something that I really need not to forget, because I'm very distracted, it would be first, word or setting students with the word translation per se. Second, I know this is very debatable and very, it's a very polemic thing, but for me, more than ever, with concrete examples, we're co-setting our students if we go that way. The second thing is, I understand responsible AI, I'm involved, but it's still so hard to put in place. There's so many different adaptations to publics, so many different adaptations to several layers of the society, and this is a huge effort we need to do in the next decade or so, because this is just a seed and we're seeing how hard it is to put into practice. And the third one is, I'm very optimistic that we're moving towards a more human-centric way of seeing translation, language as a whole, since we're not just text, we're not just speech, we're image, we're gestures, we're even the way we position ourselves towards the other and the distance we have towards the other says a lot about who we are. Our micro expressions, our prosody, everything we say is about who we are. And we're moving to a more holistic view of who we are and who translators, linguists, computational linguists, whatever you want to call it, can be. And I think there's a great disruptive future and challenges ahead of us. That's my Post-its.